Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Shormila Mojumdar, Associate Professor, Department of English, University of Kalyani, West Bengal. This is your module on John Updike, the American novelist, short story writer, literary critic and cartoonist. He was born on March 18, 1932 and died on January 27, 2009. Before we go to discuss the novel, I would like to say a few things about the period which is dealt with in the novel and which was central to Updike's thoughts about America and his vocation as a novelist and an artist. In the 1950s America, there was instability in American psychological life, if I may say so, because after the Second World War, America was renegotiating its position on the international scene, and it was the period of Cold War, by which is meant the rivalry between the capitalist America and communist Russia, their race for supremacy and their race for control over the over international affairs. And something happened in America which has later been described as McCarthyism. America was mortally scared of communism reaching its shore and was skeptical or rather suspicious about quite a number of people that they were indulging in activities which were considered to be un-American, anti-state, by which they meant that they were believing in communist philosophy or indulging in activities associated with the Communist Party. And so you see, there was some kind of a political ambivalence on the American scene, and people were struggling to adjust to the American way of life. By the 1950s, they were making money. They were supposed to be quite prosperous, and they were propagating a middle class conservative lifestyle where men earn money, women cook, bear and rear children, they adhere to Christian church, and so they become happy. So the idea of American dream has been restricted to being polite, being middle class, being solvent, being conformist, and being religious. So in this background, John Updike writes this novel. Updike's most famous series of works is the Rabbit series, which includes the following novels: Rabbit Run, Rabbit Redo, Rabbit is Rich, Rabbit at Rest. And this is the tetralogy, and long after that he wrote Rabbit Remembered, which is kind of a novella. Both Rabbit is Rich, published in 1982, and Rabbit at Rest 1990 were recognized by the critics, and Updike received the Pulitzer Prize for both these books. Now Updike is the third American writer to be awarded Pulitzer twice. His stories, reviews and poems often appeared in the New Yorker starting in the year 1954. He also wrote for the New York Review of Books. Actually, he was on the staff of the New York Reviewer for 2 years, who regularly wrote columns for it, after which he left to become a full-time professional writer. There are a few other books by John Updike. A book published in 1970, Beck is Back, 1982, Beck at Bay, 1998, The Complete Henry Beck, 2001. There are Buchanan books, Buchanan Dying, it's a play published in 1974, Memories of the Ford Administration, a novel published in 1992. Then there are the Eastwick books. 1984 saw the publication of The Witches of Eastwick, and 2008 saw the publication of The Widows of Eastwick. There are several other books, some of them are short stories, like the Scarlet Letter trilogy. Then in 1975 was published A Month of Sundays, and in 1986 Rogers' version. He was a prolific writer, and his writing skills were can be found in various genres like novels, like short stories, like plays, like other critical works. And interestingly, he trained to be a cartoonist at Oxford. So his primary interest was cartoon. There are other novels as well, like The Poorhouse Fair, 1959, The Centaur, 1963, Of the Farm, 1965, Couples, 1968, Marry Me, 1977, The Coup, 1978, Brazil, 1994, In the Beauty of the Lilies, 1996, Toward the End of Time, 1997, Gertrude and Claudius, 2000, Sick My Face, 2002, Villages, 2004, Terrorist, 2006. Now we will talk about the life and time of John Updike. Because in any discussion of a literary work, it always helps if you know a little bit of the biography of the author, because that situates him in time, that situates him in a country, that situates him in a political situation, and that also situates him in a cultural situation. So his books become even more meaningful if you know about him a little bit of his biographical detail. Born in Reading, Pennsylvania, the only child of Linda Grace and Wesley Russell Updike, John was raised in the nearby small town of Shillington. Once Updike remarked that his subject matter is small town white American middle class. I'm not really quoting because I'm not sure about it, but something to this effect, that his major interest in literature was small town, middle class, white American life, and the vacuity in it, the meaninglessness that is inherent, almost inherent in it, and attempts of some of these characters to escape it. After his graduation, Updike attended the Ruskin School of Drawing and Fine Art at the University of Oxford with the intention of becoming a cartoonist. After his return to the United States, Updike and his family moved to New York, where he became a regular contributor to The New Yorker. This was the advent of his writing career, which he took as a profession. Updike stayed with The New Yorker as a full-time staff writer for only 2 years, writing talk of the town columns and submitting poetry and short stories to the magazine division. Now we come to the novel, which is called Rabbit Run. I would like you to take a look at the title of the novel, because it is probably taken from a song which was very popular during the Second World War, which ran something like Run, Rabbit, Run. So the title is probably taken from a very popular song of the Second World War era. And you see, there is rabbit, then there is a comma, and there is run, which is kind of an exhortation for the rabbit to run. And what kind of an animal a rabbit is? Weak, meek, slightly unsure, continuously running around, not knowing what it is looking for, and considered to be a harmless pet. So the central character is called Rabbit. So you can see these are some of the significations which can probably be attached to the name of the central character, and that is why the running of the central character, he doesn't know what he is running to, but he is running around. That becomes one of the major themes in the novel. Rabbit Run featured Rabbit Angstrom, a former high school basketball favorite and a middle-class paragon who went on to become Updike's most popular, critically acclaimed character. Updike wrote 3 complementary novels about him. Rabbit Run was presented in Time's all-time 100 greatest novels. Updike once said the name Angstrom is derived from his reading of the German philosopher Kierkegaard, because you see there was quite early in his life Updike faced some kind of a spiritual crisis about his religious faith, about his belief in Christianity, and he went to study a lot of philosophy, among them the most important being Kierkegaard. And Angstrom is derived from angst, which is a kind of pained response to existence. And so Rabbit Angstrom is a character who is pained at the futility, at the meaninglessness of his existence, and continuously tries to escape from him, but without ever being successful. And in the course of these escapades, he runs into various kinds of troubles, and he has never been able to resolve what he is looking for and how to get at it. He is continuously escaping, trying to find something, running around, but never come to a satisfactory destination. And in America, just like in India, cricket is hugely popular, and if a boy plays cricket at school level and he has promise, people think of his bright future. And so it's in America, basketball is hugely popular there, and all the school children, they follow basketball religiously, and the boys who play basketball well, they become kind of heroes. So that is how the protagonist of this novel begins his life. He is a kind of a hero, a very prominent player in his school basketball team. So he begins with a promise, and it so happens that he wants to remain a member of the school basketball team throughout his life, because after he leaves his school and no more promising basketball player, his life loses all meaning. His life, he has no future. So he continuously tries to goes back to the school days where he was a prominent member of the basketball team, where he was kind of a hero. Updike published a sequel to Rabbit Run called Rabbit Rideau in 1971, 11 years after the first book. His response to the 1960s, Rabbit Rideau is his response to the 1960s, just as Rabbit Run, which was published in 1960, was his reaction to the 1950s. Rabbit reflected much of Updike's ambivalence towards the social and political changes that beset the United States during that time. Now, you have to remember 1960s was a very important decade in the history of America, because the civil rights movement, about which we talked in our module on Martin Luther King Jr. and his famous speech, I Have a Dream. The American civil rights movement reached its peak in the 1960s. Several major legislations were enacted giving the blacks equal rights with the whites to live in places wherever they want to, send their children to whichever school they want to. And it was also met with severe opposition from white supremacists who were still then very powerful, and which resulted in the assassination of Martin Luther King in April 1968. So this very turbulent period of American history and Updike's reaction to this turbulence in American history, and more importantly, the way he tried to negotiate with this turbulence in American history, that is reflected in this book, Rabbit Radio. After his early novels, Updike became most famous for his presenting through his works the concepts of infidelity, adultery, and marital unrest, especially in suburban America, and for his controversial depiction of the confusion and freedom inherent in this crumbling social structure. In the year 1980, he published another novel featuring the character Rabbit. It was called Rabbit is Rich, which won him the National Book Award, the National Book Critics Circle Award, and the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction, all of three major American literary prizes. Now, you see, I would like to go back a little bit to the novels he published in the 1980s, which, as it is said, which deals with marital infidelity, promiscuity, adultery, which is there in suburban middle class American life. Somehow Updike felt that these are the issues which are very important for middle class American, but these are the issues which were not being addressed adequately in literature. These were the issues which were somehow pushed under the carpet, and there were other things less important which are being talked about. And the problem was that puritanical America believed in monogamous fidelity of marriage, the sexual purity. So the very acknowledgement of the fact that marriages were not monogamous, there was marital infidelity, there was promiscuity, there was adultery, at least in the beginning came as a shock for the publishers as well as the reading public. In the year 2006, the Rabbit series was voted number 4 on the New York Times list of the best work of American fiction of the past 25 years. Rabbit Run was also selected by Time magazine as one of the top 100 books from 1923 to 2005. And the novel is listed by the American Library Association as one of the 100 most frequently banned books in the 20th century. Rabbit Run touches on some delicate issues like prostitution, male and female orgasms, alcoholism, adultery, homosexuality, though only briefly and ambiguously, birth control and abortion. Rabbit Run also has lots of conversation between people arguing about different Christian philosophies, a main character with a complex relationship with Christ, a couple of atheists, and even a Freudian. And now I come back to what we were talking about, the treatment of certain topics in the novels, like male and female orgasm, like alcoholism, like homosexuality. People were still not very comfortable about these things being talked about so openly in literature. As you know, the text of the novel went through several rewritings. Knopf originally required Updike to cut some sexually explicit passages, but he restored and rewrote the book for the 1963 Penguin edition and again for the 1995 Everyman's Omnibus edition. Though it had been done earlier, as in William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying and Albert Camus' The Fall, Updike's novel is noted as being one of several well-regarded early usages of the present tense in writing. So you see, this is if not a pioneering deviation, but it was certainly very important, and it was noted duly that Updike used present tense in writing, because if you read major American novelists, you will find that most of them, they wrote in the past, which meant that they were dealing with something which is already a part of history. But Updike is writing in the present tense, which indicates that what he is writing is contemporary. It is not yet history. It is part of our everyday life. It is in the circumstances. It is there blowing in the wind. Updike has been hugely praised for his prose style. Several contemporary writers, like English novelist Kingsley Amis, they all praised Updike for his delicate, subtle prose style, and it's not really always very simple and straightforward, and as a result of which the reader is invited to negotiate between what is written and what is meant. So some kind of intellectual engagement on the part of the reader is very necessary to read Updike's novels. And I have been talking about something which was crucial to Updike's reputation as a novelist, because the very explicit description of sex in his novels was criticized. Sometimes he was asked to partly leave out sections which were considered to be very graphic, and he was kind of compelled to rewrite Rabbit Run. But you see, because if you look at the story of the novel, this character Rabbit, he was a very promising member of his school basketball team. Afterwards, he becomes a small town salesman. And if you remember Arthur Miller's play Death of a Salesman, probably you will be able to relate the two situations. Here is a man who is a salesman. He has nothing to be happy about. His life is monotonous, boring, mundane, and it is something which makes him deeply unhappy. And he is married to a woman who happens to be a sales girl also. They work together in a shop, and he has a child by her. And when his wife is pregnant for the second time, he leaves her, because somehow he doesn't find anything in his existence, either in his family life or in his relationship with his parents, his wife, or in his job, which gives him any amount of satisfaction. So he runs away, he runs. And then he gets into a relationship with another woman. And one day he comes to know that this woman also slept with another boy who was in the school basketball team and who was an arch rival. So he kind of runs away from her as well. And then he meets the local priest, and there are certain very interesting discussion between them, because when you are talking about a man like Rabbit Angstrom, you don't really expect him to be a thinking person who is who spares any thought about theology, about Christianity, about the importance of religion in individual's life. But interestingly, Rabbit engages with some kind of dialogue with the local priest. The local priest persuades him to reunite with his wife, which he first refuses. And then there is a seesaw movement. He goes back to his wife, and a daughter is born, but he is as unhappy as he were, he is as dissatisfied as he was, and he again runs away to the woman Ruth he was staying with, and Ruth tells him that she is pregnant by his child, but at the same time he refuses to divorce his wife, and then an accident takes place. In a drunken fit, his wife kills the baby daughter. Actually, the daughter suffocates in bathtub. And when this happens, Rabbit is staying with Ruth. And then he gets the news. He comes back, and during the funeral of the child, he seems to be completely lost. So if you look at the bare storyline of this novel, you will find that this man is very unstable. He doesn't know what he is looking for. He doesn't know how to get it. He is continuously running around from one woman to another, from one household to another household. He is looking for satisfaction. He even indulges in some kind of philosophical discussion with the local priest. He doesn't know how religion matters in a very ordinary life like his, but he still feels that there is something there in his life which demands immediate attention, and which can probably be resolved if he learns more about religion and Christian theology. And this has got a definite autobiographical element in it, because probably I have already mentioned that Updike went through some kind of a spiritual crisis early in his life, and he became skeptical of Christian religion. He read a lot of existentialist philosophy, though at the end he came back to the Christian fold and remained a believing Christian till the end of his life. But this crisis in his own life is reflected in Rabbit's rather amateurish engagement with religion. And in a way, it captures the life of small town, as Updike himself said, small town, white, middle class American, very staid, very straight-jacketed, monotonous life, as a result of which many of them, they want to go back to their childhood, early youth, because for them it is absolutely imperative to be young to be happy. If you are not young, you can't be happy. Once you cross your youth and you step into your adulthood, your middle age, you have lost everything. So look for something which often results in this kind of alcoholism, adultery, marital infidelity and promiscuity, because they cannot find anything else to satisfy their sense of loss, their sense of vacuum in their mundane existence. So in a way, Rabbit Run is an iconic novel which captures, and this is, you remember, this is a tetralogy and spread over more than 2 decades. So the American life life during the 50s, 60s and 70s as it was seen by a man who was a white middle class American and who was very much interested in common American. People who are not extraordinary in any way, people who didn't achieve anything, the common American and their life, their crisis, their sense of loss, their sense of vacuity and their attempt to reconcile themselves to it and to find out some kind of a resolution to their problem. All these things make up Rabbit Run are an iconic novel, and the entire series an iconic series which reflects the American life so well. Thank you.